Hey everybody, and welcome back to another lecture with Coding with Roby. And in this lecture, we are going to install Alembic while doing a little bit of code cleanup for our directory. So I'm in the directory of our Fast API where we have our Fast API environment, our to-do app, and books, books2, and readme. So we're going to do a little bit of cleanup before we jump into Alembic just to make our directory slightly cleaner. So I'm going to close out of my PyCharm where my Fast API directory is. And then I'm going to open up in my Explorer my project of Fast API that we were just looking at in PyCharm. The first thing I want to do is delete books and books2. Those were the first things that we created in this course. They've been kind of staying with us through all of our projects as a reference that we can look back at. And I'm just going to delete them so we don't see them anymore. So I'm just going to click on both of them and click delete. And then this to-do app, and we do have it kind of separated in different directories. We don't need it separated as much as we currently do, just because our Fast API project is fairly small. So I'm going to jump into my to-do app directory, grab everything inside, drag and drop it up to our Fast API main directory, and that should leave our to-do app completely empty. Then go back to our Fast API. Again, I'm going to make sure our to-do app is empty, and then I am going to delete the to-do app. So now in our main Fast API directory, we have our .idea and PyCatch, which is our cache for our IDEA, our JetBrains PyCharm, and just our Python. And then we have our company Fast API environment, MySQL, PostgreSQL, routers, database. If you're following directly along, it might be identical to this. You might be missing some things, but overall, if you just remove the to-do app, we should be good to go. So now I'm going to reopen up my PyCharm. And when I reopen this, we can now see that my to-do app is gone, and so is books1 and books2, and everything is currently in this directory. Just to verify, I'm going to say open up my terminal, and now instead of going into our to-do app, I'm just going to type in uvicorn main app -- reload from here. And everything is working properly. So I just want to do a quick check to make sure everything started up and everything was looking good, and it is. So I'm just going to close out of this now. Now, the very first thing we need to do for Alembic is to install it into our application. We can do this by typing in pip install Alembic. And here we can see that we just installed Alembic. And with the installation of Alembic, we can now use Alembic within our project. But now that we have our directory or our library of Alembic, we now need to initialize Alembic into our project. And we can do this by typing in Alembic init. This will initialize our project with a new Alembic environment. However, the last parameter we need in this command is to name the directory of which we want Alembic to be inside. You can name it whatever you want, but for this tutorial, we're going to just name it Alembic. So it's going to say Alembic init Alembic. And then I'm going to press enter. And it's saying it's generating all the directories we need for Alembic. So after typing in Alembic init Alembic, we get our Alembic directory. We now, inside of our Alembic directory, we have our versions. We have our new Alembic ini, and that's going to hold all of our properties for our project. And then within our Alembic directory, we're going to have our environmental properties, our README, and our scripts. So if we just kind of click around, it should refresh, and there it goes, with a new Alembic directory and our alembic.ini file. Well, let's start by opening up our alembic.ini file. And I will close some of the areas so we can see better. So a generic single database configuration is the first thing it says. And inside we can see that it has a whole bunch of different properties for our application. We have our path to migration scripts, which is our script location equals Alembic, and I'll show you where our scripts are. We have our template used to generate migration files and file templating. Here we can add a prepend to our system's path if we want to. And we can read the comment above, which will tell us exactly what it's doing. We can change our time zone if we want. We can change our max length of characters that apply to our slug field. We can set to true to run the environment during the revision command, regardless of auto-generate revision environments, which equal false. And you can just see that there's a whole bunch of different information that we can configure for our Alembic project. Now, one of the biggest things that we will change in a future video is our SQLAlchemy.url. Right here, it's telling us to add our driver with our user and password with our localhost and DB name. We will be doing all of this in Postgres. So since Postgres is a production database, we're going to be doing this with Postgres, and I will be walking you step by step on how to set this up. This will be very similar to how we set up in our database.py file. However, we're going to be adding it to Alembic so Alembic knows where to change these migration scripts. We can also add post-writing scripts. We can use different kind of formatting, and our loggers, handlers, formatters, etc. is all introduced in our alembic.ini file. In our new Alembic directory, we can see that there's versions, our environment.py file, our readme, and some more. So let's start with our readme. If we open this up, it's just going to say a generic single database configuration. Here we can add extra information on how we can use Alembic within our application. This is just for people to be able to read and understand what this directory is doing. We have our script.py.mako, which is just kind of overviewing of what our revisions will look like when we get there. We have our environment.py file. And here we can see that we have our SQL Alchemy importing our engine from config and our pool, and we have Alembic, which imports our context. And here we can see some of what our environmental properties are doing. This is the Alembic configuration object, which provides access to the values within the ini file in use. We can interpret the configuration files for the Python logging using this line that set up loggers. We can set up our target metadata, which is currently none, but we're going to have to configure this eventually with our current database. And we can add more values down here. We can also have a way to run migrations that are offline. And also vice versa, run migrations online. So there's a whole bunch of helpful information that's going to be used within our application through Alembic. Our last directory of versions is a way for us to be able to write revisions. And we'll get to that in the next lecture, but when we create revisions to be able to upgrade or downgrade our application, it'll all be within here. So with all this is a ton of information to kind of get started with Alembic, and I will see you in the next video where we're going to talk more about how to upgrade, downgrade, and just overall more about Alembic. So with that, I will see you in the next video.